Greetings, family. This is Dr. Kia Pruitt. It is Friday, October the 21st, 2022, and the time is 11:36 a.m. I hope you've had a magnificent week. So far, my week has gone very well, and I have a lot of exciting plans for the weekend. So we do have some breaking news, and we also have some very, what do you call it? Some very somber news or sobering news, I should put it. And what I mean by sobering is the things that we've been talking about, the things that we've been waiting for are actually occurring right in front of our eyes, but most people don't see it because mainstream media will tell you, look over here or look over there. Meanwhile, the global financial system is collapsing. Now, as I had told you all before, particularly since September 25th during Rosh Hashanah, which is the Hebrew New Year and the Feast of Trumpets, something major is about to happen. Because along with Rosh Hashanah and the Feast of Trumpets or the shofar blowing, we also know that this particular year is the year of the Shamatai. Now, in the Hebrew culture, the Shamatai is the end of a 7th-year period. So the story goes that according to our culture, that when the children of Israel entered into the promised land, their God or the God of the Hebrew people or the creator instructed them to count a period of 7 years. At the end of the 7th year, there was supposed to be a year of release, and that is called Shamatai. Now, Shamatai, or the year of release, is the time period when you're supposed to forgive all debts and let your slaves go, let your debtors go, and completely release them and let them be free. Additionally, you are supposed to allow the people to come upon the land because it's a time for the land to have a rest period and eat or glean freely from the land so that they can feel and satisfy themselves. This was a very exciting time period, this 7th year, the end of the 7th-year cycle, and it is also a jubilee. Now, historically, what has occurred during Shamatai, or the 7th-year cycle, the end of that cycle, on that 7th year, is a market crash. We saw that happen in 1929, and that led to the Great Depression. So every 7th year, you would see something significant occur. You can look throughout history and see a global financial crisis, a market collapse, or something happening at the end of the 7th-year period. Now, again, I said that this is the end of that 7th-year period for us. So I looked at 1929 all the way up to the period that we are in today. And I said, well, that might be a bit much for people to grapple. So let's look at what occurred in 2000, 2001, because, most of us remember that period. So when you look at what happened in 2001, you had 9/11. 9/11 led to a great global crisis and a crash in the system, a global financial crash. So that was 2001. Then you add 7 years to that. The end of that 7-year cycle was 2008. We saw not only a market collapse or market crash, but we saw the housing bubble burst. Then 7 years from that, you have 2015. There was another great recession. And so now here we are 7 years after 2015, we are in the Shamatai period of 2022. Historically, you see this great big crash occurring between September and October. Now we're at the end of October, and we see that the market is volatile. 1 minute it looks like things are looking well. The next minute things are getting bad, or it looks like the market is, headed for a crash. But something broke recently that we need to pay attention to. And Gregory Mannarino, who is always letting us know what's going on in the financial system, took to his platform to tell us to beware that we're about to experience the greatest financial crash in history. So listen to this. The Bank of America. Now, anytime the Bank of America, IMF, or any large institutions start to tell you that you need to pay attention to what's going on, family, we need to pay attention. So Bank of America reported this, and this is in Market Watch. It says, fragile Treasury market is at risk of large-scale forced selling or surprise that leads to a breakdown, Bank of America says. And I'll read this a little bit for you so you can see this. It says, the world's deepest and most liquid fixed income market is in big trouble. For months, traders, academics, and other analysts have fretted that the 23.7 trillion treasuries market might be the source of the next financial crisis. It goes on to say, we believe the UST market is fragile and potentially one shock away from functioning challenges arising from either large-scale forced selling or an external surprise, says the Bank of America strategist Mark Cabana. Raf Axel and Adarsh Simna. A UST Treasury breakdown is not our base case, but is a building tail risk. So basically, the way Gregory Mannarino explains that is, we're about to see a collapse of the entire system, because whenever you have a breakdown in a credit system, that impacts everything around us. He says this is a threat to human existence. A meltdown of our financial system leads to a complete market breakdown or a complete breakdown. He said that will affect our transactions. That will affect whether or not your credit cards will work, your ATM will work. Will you be able to get money out of the banks? He said when you have a problem or a breakdown or a collapse in a credit system, and keeping in mind that everything operates on credit, you're talking about supplies being interrupted or affected, resources, deliveries, everything is affected when you talk about credit, because we are on a credit-based system. So whenever Bank of America tells you that we're headed for a global financial crisis, we definitely need to pay attention. Now, this was a direct quote from Gregory Mannarino. A systemic meltdown of the financial system is the greatest threat to humankind, bar none, period. It is something that we need to pay attention to. Everything that happens in our lives, he said, involves credit. Companies, trucks being able to get supplies, things being able to be transported, everything, lending, banking lending, all of that is connected to the credit market. So if there is a breakdown in the credit system, then we know that our existence is affected. Now, he goes on to say that in the news, you will see things that will distract us and tell us that we don't, we need to pay attention to what's going on with Ye or Kanye West and how he wore a White Lives Matter t-shirt and how he got on Drink Champs and said that there are certain Zionists that are controlling the system, that have controlled entertainers, that have controlled the banking system, that have controlled the government, that have controlled the political arena. And so, although I don't necessarily know that Ye is serving as a distraction because he's telling the truth, I do know that this is like imploding, or exploding, when he's talking about it on all these social media platforms. He's taken to what Drink Champs, which is something that I'm just becoming aware of, where he's talking about how the system has been controlled by bloodline families that are masquerading as Jews, but they're really Zionists, and that is actually awakening some people. Now over here, we already know about this, okay? And keep in mind that when he and Candace Owens wore a t-shirt, White Lives Matter, he was simply saying that all lives matter and that we shouldn't be divisive, because at one time people were saying Black Lives Matter, as if nobody else's life matter. And so all Ye is saying and Mr. West is saying is, look, we all matter. We've all been enslaved. We all have been victims of the system, and we need to wake up and realize that, because at some point we're going to have to come together and unify, because the system, as Gregory Mannarino has told us, is breaking down. Now, I was looking at another article, And I'm going to read this for you just a little bit. It says, hot U.S. inflation is boosting market expectations for a 5% or higher Fed funds rate in a matter of months. In other words, inflation is through the roof. It is increasing. And with high inflation, high prices, people cannot afford to pay for things. Then what you're going to see is the value of the dollar decrease. And what do we always say? We always say that as the value of the USD decreases, precious metals increase, or the value of precious metals increase. Now, I know if you downloaded the USD debt clock, you saw that the dollar to silver ratio is only like $900 and something dollars, whereas before it was like $1,200. And I remember one time, like a couple years ago, it was over $4,000 per ounce. You will also notice that the dollar to gold ratio has decreased on the US debt clock. What's happening is that is supposed to be the real prices of silver and gold, which is different from if you go to APMEX or Miles Franklin or SD Bullion or JM Bullion's websites and see the spot prices of silver and gold right now. The spot price for silver is somewhere between $18 and $19 an ounce, but the US debt clock says it's over $900 per ounce, right? And the gold spot price is probably $1,800, $1,900. I haven't looked at it in a few days, dollars per ounce, but on the US debt clock, it says that it's way more than that. When you see these prices decreasing, whether it be on the website and it talks about spot prices or the US debt clock, when you see that happens, you see a decrease in prices, you have to know that they are not reporting correctly, because all economists know that as the USD decreases in value, precious metals increase in value. And we don't see that happening. We see precious metals, at least what we see with our eyes, actually decreasing. Why is that? The reason that is happening is because you have them rigging markets, spoofing markets, lying about the markets, okay? So that you won't know that silver and gold hold or maintain their value and increase in value. When they lower the rates or the spot prices online or with the United States debt clock, they're doing it so that they can buy up the silver and gold. And by the time you wake up and realize that everybody else is getting the silver and gold, the banks are buying up silver and gold, countries are repatriating their gold back to them, billionaires and millionaires are buying up silver and gold. By the time you awaken, then the demand will be so high and the supply will shrink and shrink. There will not be enough above ground silver and gold for you to get. So it looks. Now, we all know that the earth is abundant and the Creator has produced more than enough. My encouragement to you, though, is to consider what they have that is actually available for us before the white hats completely release the silver and gold that is in abundance to us. What you see right now happening is wholesalers are almost out of all of their product with silver and gold. Some wholesalers are completely out of their product, so that you have people like Andy Schectman, the CEO of Miles Franklin, saying that, it's becoming harder and harder for him to get silver and gold in order to sell it to us. So family, while you can, get into the market. Now, I have some good news, but hold on, okay? I have to get into what else is going on behind the scenes while there's a breakdown in supply chain, while resources look like they're limited, while inflation is sky high, prices are increasing, the debt market is imploding. But pay attention, everything is tied to debt, okay? But let me complete this report before I get to the good news. Now, when you look at the consumer price index, the report shows that consumer prices jumped 0.4% last month, which was more than they expected. Overall prices are up from 8.2% more than a year ago. So over the same period, your core prices rose almost 7%, which is the biggest increase in core prices in a 40-year period. So you see interest rates increasing. You see core price with the report showing the consumer price index reporting that core prices are rising, inflation is rising. Then there was an article that said the Fed is likely to consider a 75 basis point interest rate hike, which is the biggest since 1994. Interest rates are going up. Inflation is increasing. People are seeing that it costs way more to buy food than it did last year. So all of this is happening along with the credit market having an issue. What this means for us, as Gregory Mannarino reported, is that you'll see the supply chain supply chain have issues. You will see deliveries have issues. You will see possibly some banking issues because banks lend to businesses. So if banks lend to businesses and businesses participate and trade, but they have an issue with the credit, or the credit markets are having issues, then this could affect our everyday life. So what Gregory Mannarino reported when he was on Liberty and Finance YouTube channel is the best way to prepare is what he's been screaming for a long time, and what all of our people who are survivalists have been screaming. It's within our best interest to plant our own food, so get some seeds. At the very least, you should have some relationships with gardeners and farmers, or your wholesalers or people in your community who grow food. You should be in communication with people who make clothes. You should make sure you have established relationships basically with your neighbors and people in your community, because you might get to the point where you have to do some bartering and some trading. I would also recommend that you have some pre-1965 coins, which is called constitutional silver or junk silver, because it might become a time when you need to barter with your silver. And since a lot of people recognize pre-constitutional silver as money, they might be willing to trade for that. Also have you some ounces of silver, whether it's a quarter of an ounce, an eighth of an ounce. You can also get kilograms, 100 ounce bars, whatever you can get in your possession. But you might not even need to go to that great length. You should consider bartering such that you say, okay, I'm growing food. I will give you food in exchange for you teaching my children, because I don't want my children to be in a public school system. Or if you make my clothes, because who knows, Walmart and some of these other places could shut down, because they will be affected by the supply chain issues, especially when you think of credit markets having issues or imploding. So you give me food, I'll make your clothes, whatever. Get to know your neighbors, reestablish relationships in your community. Let's get our families back together, because we want everybody to be okay. Now, we know about NESARA, we know about JSARA, the National Economic Security and Reformation Act, and the Global Economic Security and Reformation Act. We all know that's happening behind the scenes. However, sometimes before things completely get good, they could get worse. Now, this is what Gregory Mannarino has warned us. He said, they probably won't tell you the system is over, it's collapsing, we're in trouble, we messed up, we created a credit system that is imploding upon itself. They probably won't tell you that the banking system is nefarious and lending money and exacting usury or interest rates is not biblical and it's unlawful. They're not going to tell you that. So our time is up. They're not going to tell you straight out. I'm talking about the central banks and the malevolent people in power, they're not going to say, listen, the white hats of the military has come to dismantle our system and therefore it's over for us, it's done. They're not going to do that. What they are most likely to do, according to Gregory Mannarino and some people who have given us intel, is they might stage something like they did before. There's usually a black swan event that occurs that will be like a smoke screen or a cover that they have to blame these things on. For example, we had the Plan D, right? The Plan DEMIC. You know, got to be careful what you say. The whole sickness, the CV that shut down the whole world. Well, when that happened, this sickness that they created that shut down the whole world, when that happened, they blamed the global financial system collapsing or having issues on that. They printed a bunch of money up. They closed down the system, businesses were closed, people were off work. And so what they said is, this is the reason why we're in trouble. This is the reason we were in a global recession. But they didn't tell you that we were headed for a recession anyway, okay? Because they've been printing, a lot of money with quantitative easing and all the things that they've been doing because of the debt market. So how these things will play out is that you will more likely see a complete meltdown of the global financial system, a complete breakdown. You will see the market crash. In terms of prophecy and looking at history and things that have occurred throughout history, since we've been on this planet, at the Shamatai period, you will see a global market crash. You will see stock markets collapsing. You will see the Dow plummet. You will see the NASDAQ plummet. You will see all of them plummet because this is what naturally occurs when you're printing money, when you're on a system that is not backed by gold and silver, when you're exacting usury and interest, which is unlawful and also not biblical and unnatural. When you see all those things occur, it has to happen. Okay, it will happen, and it will happen during the Shamatai period. So again, prepare, family. I know I keep saying the same thing over and over, but sometimes you have to reiterate things in order for people to know that this is very serious. I think that's about it for that. So what Gregory Mannarino said was the skyrocketing of inflation and high increase in interest rates. Everything will continue to inflate. And it will also inflate the money supply. So he said, get access to energy, food, water, and all the other resources that you need, as well as, like I've already said, establishing relationships with your family and your community. Also in the news, I've reported, and I saw this come across my desk actually twice this week, is that they are making preparations for a funeral, for King Charles. Now, as I have told you before, King Charles has been summoned to the International Tribunal Court for his alleged activities or participation in what occurred with his mom, Queen Elizabeth, and his dad, Philip, as it relates to Indigenous children in Canada. So as you all know, we've reported this before, and it has been in the news before. Allegedly, Queen Elizabeth and her husband did certain nefarious things to children who were Indigenous at a private school, a private Catholic school in Canada, that led to them missing. Now, some people said that she inhaled, or consumed these children, because when you're a reptilian, a draconian, and some of these other nefarious, or I don't want to call them nefarious, but it's nefarious to us, but beings from other realms, a shapeshifter, you need not only the energy that we call you loose from human beings, but you also can feast off the flesh and the blood. So again, Queen Elizabeth was summoned to tribunal court as well, but what happened was there was one survivor of the children when this occurred, that was supposed to testify, that did not make it to testify at the tribunal court because this child also ended up mysteriously dead. So that didn't occur according to my intel. Was they weren't able to push forward, at least with that particular court case or hearing. So now fast forward to King Charles now being in charge of the monarch over there in Britain. He was summoned to the tribunal court, International Tribunal Court, and he is supposed to show up November the 1st, 2022, right before, don't we have elections coming up actually in November? So I thought that was interesting that they chose that date. But now we're at the end of October and we're hearing that he's dead. We did know he was extremely sick. Now we're hearing that he's dead and that they're preparing for his funeral. Now, you and I know that he's already gone. He's been eliminated a long time ago, but officially the news is now that he was, well, it was reported weeks ago that he was extremely sick and had heart failure. Now we're hearing that they're reporting, preparing for his funeral. That has not made it to mainstream news yet, but I did put up I think it was a tweet that somebody from over there reported or tweeted out. So I put that in the community section. If you look on my YouTube page and you look at the top, the tab, you will see community. So you click on the community tab and you will see that the last thing I put up there was preparations for Charles's funeral. So isn't that interesting that it's happening right before he's supposed to appear before the tribunal court, the International Tribunal Court, on November 1, as well as right before elections. So we're hearing all this news. They're telling us that things are getting worse financially, but you all knew that we will have a complete global meltdown, a breakdown in the financial system. People have been reporting that. But the good news is that the quantum financial system is actually operating side by side or right next to this system that we had in place. So additionally, we know that people are returning to the gold standard. So if you look at my video that I did a couple of days ago, I go into great lengths about how we know that the world behind the scenes is actually on the gold standard. So look at that video. It is an extensive video, but I talk about bills that were passed, or not passed, but bills that were introduced. I talk about countries repatriating their gold. I talk about how Dr. Judy Shelton was nominated to be over the Fed. I talk about how the Federal Reserve system was actually put underneath the U.S. Treasury Department under number 45, and how all these things were a precursor to us moving to the gold standard. I also talk about how Russia had mentioned in 2018 that they were returning to the gold standard, but nobody paid attention, or very few people paid attention, because it wasn't on mainstream media news. But I still have that article from 2018, and I also still remember reporting it in 2018, and it's something that they actually recirculated in 2021 and then 2022, and then in 2022 it made it out to not necessarily mainstream news, but some of the media sources that more people are more likely to look at. So in my report that I did a couple days ago, I was interviewed by a gentleman by name of Sharif Ali I think his name is, from the YouTube channel Moors in America. So please like and subscribe to his channel, Moors in America. Please like and subscribe to my channel, Dr. Kia Pruitt, and circulate it. Share the news. This is good news that we give over here. But I said all that to say that someone, Patrick Hawkins, hi Patrick, from my hometown in Cleveland, Ohio, gave me some very exciting news. He showed me this article. I saved the best for last, family. So I hope I didn't, concern you with my news in the beginning of the report. But let's talk about Europe. This is great news that Patrick sent to me. It's an article by the GSI Exchange. GSIexchange.com. It says Europe's central banks have prepared for a new international gold standard. See, you see how it's coming out, family, that we're on the gold standard. I know I've been saying this actually for years, since 2017, that we're returning to the gold standard, but we can see it before our eyes. Remember, with Project Sandman, 209 plus countries agreed to return to the gold standard behind the scenes. Project Sandman will say 100 plus countries, but we know it's 209 countries. That's why I said 209 countries, because before we even heard of Project Sandman, our intel, who happens to be farmers that participated in the claims against the United States corporation, those people who have participated in those cases brought against the United States corporation and the Federal Reserve, some of those people actually are people that I know who have shared the information with me that we would return to the gold standard. And when we do, their cases that were heard and the cases which they won against the United States corporation will then pay out. Not only them, but then you have people who went to court with the Washita Empress. And the Washita Empress, Verdi Asi Gaston L. Turner Bay, the Empress, who says that she is the what you call the I don't want to say monarch, but the empress, or the leader of the people classified as African American, or the people classified as Black, or Moors, or Washita people, or Ashita people. She took the United States corporation to court as well for them stealing the land from the indigenous people here, and she won $85 quadrillion. And that led to the United Nations declaring the African American people here, so-called African American or Black American people, the oldest indigenous people on the planet. And you know that they are, or we are, the oldest indigenous people on the planet when you understand and understand that Israel is here. The cradle of civilization is here. The Garden of Eden is here. That everything that started actually came from here in America. So when they released the biblical map, or the ancient biblical map, it showed that actually everything started here. Now, hearing that Black people came from Africa is all that was false information. That's why you can't find any slave ships. They only have drawings, because we did not come from Africa. We were already here. Now, if you look at my video from 2 days ago, where I had an interview with the gentleman who is from Moors in America, he actually showed how we were here and how we were welcoming in the colonies to come and be able to live on our land. So you got to look at that video, and I've done some other videos about that. You need to follow I'm Just Here to Make You Think, Dane Calloway's YouTube channel, just to get a little bit of background about how they lied to us and told us that we were Black, Negro, colored people, because we're none of those things. In fact, Black, it has a negative connotation, and I'll get into that later, but Black means blank, bleak, void, and almost everything negative and nefarious that you can think of. And so when I was growing up, my aunties and uncles would not allow you to refer to them Black. It used to be a derogatory term. Nobody desired to be called Black, because we were called indigenous. Actually, we were called by our tribes, okay? And that's why when an Ashita or Washita Empress took the United States corporation to court, she said, you all know that we are tribal people, and that we allowed you on the land, and a certain fragment of you bloodline families overtook our land, stole our lands from us, and lied to us, okay, lied to our children, and told them that they are not the original inhabitants of the land. Okay, so we were identified by our tribes. We were considered indigenous. We are not the same per se as the people who crossed from the Bering Strait. The Mongoloid people came across through the Bering Strait and they settled here. Those are the Native Americans, okay? Now, they married with us and they had families with us, but they were not the indigenous people that were here. We are the so-called Blacks. So we were indigenous. And then when you look up Walter Plecker in the Census Bureau, they named us they from indigenous to to colored, and then to Negro, and then to Black, and then to African American. So Black, even as I said, was derogatory, but then you had James Brown, who was controlled by his Zionist handlers, to come out with this song, say it loud, I'm Black and I'm proud. And that type of thing, as well as the programming in the schools, led us to believe that we are Black. And that thing also led to them telling stories about Africans coming from onto slave ships from Africa. And that story led people to believe that we came from Africa over here and that this is not our land. So Hollywood, who was also controlled by Zionists who call themselves Jews, and they are not Jews. We are the Jews. We people they classify as African American or Black. We are the original Jews. We have many Jews all over the land, all over the world. But Alex Haley wrote a book called Roots, and then Hollywood did a movie about Roots, which talked about him coming from Africa and being a slave here on this land, and how all the terrible things happened to them, his people. That got into the psyche of the indigenous people and made us think that we were from Africa. But actually, Alex Haley was sued by Harold Corlander, who is a Caucasian man who wrote a book called The African. And Harold Corlander in court proved that Alex Haley had actually stolen his characters from his book and lied and said these people are his family members, and he won his case in court. So these are things that happen behind the scenes that people don't talk about because they don't want you to know the true history. The true history also entails us having a relationship with the people that came here from Europe, or that they call the colonists. We actually welcomed them. I don't know that all of us welcomed them, but I would say the government, the Moorish government, who was in control here at the time in America, welcomed them to come here and participate and set up their own nation here. We welcomed them here and had treaties with them. All this is real news that will come out in time. So let's get back to the gold standard. This article says Europe's central banks have prepared for a new international gold standard. Research reveals that European central banks have prepared a new international gold standard. Since the 1970s, policies that paved the way for an equitable and durable monetary system have gradually been implemented. So this writer says, in my view, the current fiat international monetary system is ending. Unconventional monetary policy has entered a dead-end street and it cannot reverse, the author says. He says, I've written about this before and will not repeat this message in today's article. Instead, we'll discuss a topic that deserves more attention, namely that European central banks saw this coming decades ago when the world shifted to a pure paper money standard. Accordingly, European central banks have carefully prepared a new monetary system based on gold. So you see, family, it's not just the BRICS nations that have left the USD and are preparing or have returned to the gold standard. It's not just Zimbabwe, as I've been reporting and I talked about in my video I did 2 days ago. It's not those just Saudi Arabia that have left the USD and returning to gold. It's not just Turkey, Malaysia, Indonesia, Egypt, Iran, Iraq, and all exporting nations that have made an announcement that either we're joining BRICS or we have made application to join BRICS nation. But now you see that Europe's central banks are preparing. They have prepared for a new international gold standard. So when somebody tells you that they are doing something, they're going to do something, Europe is saying, look, we have prepared. And if they say we prepared, basically what they're saying, as we're on the gold standard. So that's it today, family. I just want you to be aware. I want you to pay attention to the Bank of America article, which I will put in the description section. I want you to pay attention to the article that I send you on inflation. That's going to be in the description section as well. And I want you to pay attention to the article that says that the Fed is likely to consider 75 basis point interest rates. Additionally, if I can find an article that talks about how the housing market is crashing as well, I will put that in the description section. So look, when you hear news that looks like it's bad news, always look for the good side of it. The good side of it is that behind the scenes, we are on the gold standard. The good side of it is during Shamatai, you're supposed to have a release, which is what Shamatai means, to release, to let go. Now, historically during the Shamatai, and remember we are in a Shamatai period, they have had a market crash. What they did not do is set us free. What they did instead was bail out banks and big corporations because they were too big to fail. But we have entered a new era, a new time period. We have entered a new dimension. Stay with me. You have the opportunity to make that leap from the old system to the new system by changing your thinking. By not paying attention to mainstream news that will cause you to look over here and look over there to be discouraged, but by paying attention to high vibrational people like Dr. Kia Pruitt, paying attention to people reporting the true news like Gregory Mannarino, pay attention to people like Andy Schechtman, from Miles Franklin, from Liberty and Finance, pay attention to Bix Weir, who is the author of Road to Ruta. He has the Road to Ruta YouTube channel. He told you about the gold that's stored up in the Grand Canyon waiting to be used to liberate the planet and liberate humanity. Now, he might not add those last words that it's going to be used to liberate humanity, but he told us that it's there. So pay attention to people like this who will tell you the truth. The silver guru, David Morgan, he's been talking about how silver is very important and will liberate the planet. Arcadia Economics, Chris Marcus, my friend, pay attention to his channel that will talk to you about the value of silver, how we need silver, why we need silver. Pay attention to David Maloney, who told us about how there's a difference between money and currency and how you need to know this. Pay attention to all these people and I'm talking to you about. I know there are more. I don't want to miss out anybody, but these are the people that brings great news. The X22 report, I think his name is Dave John or something like that. But X22 report has been talking about geopolitical news, things that have been going on behind the scenes for many years, and you can find him on Rumble. Pay attention to Derek Johnson, the military guy that told us that he can show us for a certainty that the white hats of the military is actually in control, taking down the deep state. Pay attention to Taj Tariq Bey and some of the Moors who've been explaining to us what MotuProprio is about and how Pope Francis told us a long time ago that their time had come. Remember MotuProprio? When Pope Francis sent a letter to then President Obama. And he said in that letter, President Obama is not the president of America. He is the president of the United States Corporation, which is being dismantled. He said in that letter, we must cease and desist, and everything that's connected to the United States Corporation, which has enslaved the entire planet, including the Federal Reserve, including your three-letter organizations like the CIA and FBI and IRS, they all must cease and desist, he said in this letter. And if we do not, the Grand Army of the Republic, who I call the white hats of the military, will systematically take them and the financial system down. He went on to say that we're connected to the bar, the British Accredited Registry. Therefore, all lawyers and judges must cease and desist immediately, he said in this letter that he sent to Obama about 2014 to 2015. We must cease immediately because They are not beholden to the American people, but they are beholden to the British crown, which is why they have Esquire behind their name, because Esquire means you have a title of ability, which means you are above common people and you don't have their best interest at heart. You work for the crown. That's why you have to pass the bar. He said you must cease and desist immediately. Why did he say that? Because he knows that Nasara was passed in 2000. And according to Nasara, that system, the IRS, the all the three-letter organizations, the United States Corporation, all that must come down. He knew that. So he was telling people what was going on back then, but you had to see it. You had to see the letter. You had to know what was going on. You had to have certain intel. You had to know how to look behind the scenes. Thankfully, for people like me, we had Taj Tariq Bey, whom they call the Grand Sheik of the Moors, who was teaching Moorish people or indigenous people or people classified as Black or African American true history about who you are, where you came from, or from whence you came, and the fact that we had treaties with people who came over here to conduct commerce here, but a certain faction of them usurped our government, which is the republic that we created along with, we created it, but we did have some type of agreement with the Europeans that came here, okay? And again, we allowed them to conduct commerce, but those treaties had been they hadn't been honored. However, under Nasara, those treaties will be honored, and we will have our own nationality recognized. Of course, we're all American, but if you desire to be identified by your clan or by your tribe, you will be able to do that. If you desire to be identified as a Moor, part of the Moorish dynasty or empire, which was in place here in America or Amorica or Northwest Africa or what's they call the North Gate, all those things, or Turtle Island, all those things, that's who we are. If you desire to be identified by that, you will have your own ID card and you will be able to put up your own flag, because the Moorish flag is actually the flag that was here before the flag that they call the American flag. That is not a flag. The red, white, blue flag is not the flag of the country. It is a banner, according to my understanding, that the Europeans had that enabled them to, they were acknowledged underneath that flag and enabled them to conduct commerce. So if you remember, number 45 said that Morocco were the first ones to recognize us as a nation. So Morocco, that's America. This is the Moroccan Empire. The Morocco over there is actually named after us here. Now, our empire did extend out to Africa and to other parts of the world, Canada, other South America, Central America, and other parts of the world. We have a vast empire called Morocco. So when 45 said they acknowledged us as our own nation, he's telling the truth. We did. We acknowledged the Europeans that came here as their own nation, and we conducted business and commerce with them and had treaties with them. So family, pay attention to how the nefarious beings in power have caused a division between so-called races and bloodlines and caused division between human beings, but that is not natural, okay? So during this time into which we're going to have to learn to establish families again, to keep them together, and also to conduct business, not just amongst ourselves, but if you desire, conduct trade with other people or other nations, not just other countries, but other nations that are on the land. We will conduct commerce between each other. So the system collapsing on one hand is scary, and some people may take to the streets. Some people may do some serious things if their credit card stops working. Some people may get upset if they see the stock market crashing because they will worry about what happens to their retirement funds. So an answer to that for many has been to roll over some of their retirement into gold IRAs or actual precious metals that you can put into your possession. Having said that, on Tuesday, I'm going to interview, thankfully, Andy Scheckman, who's the CEO of Miles Franklin, and we will be able to talk about why it is important to have silver and gold in your own possession. And hopefully, if we get a chance to, I'm going to ask him about gold IRAs so that you all can be prepared, because we already know the system is collapsing before our eyes, and we're going to have a global market meltdown. Again, the good news is that behind the scenes, people have returned to the gold standard, and you and I have changed our mindsets. We realize that I am not an island, that it's not important to be strong and independent, and I can do it by myself, because when it comes down to it and a whole system collapses, when it all comes down, when it all falls down. A Kanye West song talk about when it all falls down, the only thing we have is each other. Okay? That's all we have. That's what we need anyway. Perhaps the other version of ourselves that's existing at the same time, other realities, or if you can receive it better, our highest self, or maybe it's the creator wanted us to know that we are sovereign, that we don't need to depend on nefarious beings or corporation. Corpse is dead bodies, dead beings. You have a corpse when you go to a funeral. Perhaps our highest selves knew, and deep within ourselves, we knew that we didn't desire, we don't like being slaves. So the system collapsing is an opportunity for us to operate as sovereign beings who are in control of our lives. Sav means reign. No, Sav means over, reign means control or rule. So we have reign and rule over our own lives as sovereign beings. So family, be encouraged. Things are happening behind the scenes and some in front of our eyes if we can open our first eye and see. It looks like it's bad news, but there is something going on behind the scenes that's also good news. Now, what do they say? Behold, behind every dark cloud, there's a silver lining. And the way 45 said it is, gold is the standard, but silver linings are great too. So my name is Dr. Kia Pruitt. I hope, I trust, I know I said something to raise your vibrations and encourage you to create the beautiful, magnificent, glorious reality that you so wonderfully desire and deserve to create and experience. Have a wonderful weekend. Make it great. I'm going to send you these articles to read in your time and look for something wonderful to happen. Look for the silver linings in your family and in your personal life. Peace. I love you. Bye-bye.